say you need a miracle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Harris, and welcome to The Game Changer. And I'm here today with CURT Pickering, my co-host, and our special guest, Lou Ventura. And Lou is here today to share some life-changing events that have happened in his life and educate us all, and with some innovative ways that we're not being told about. So welcome, Lou. Tell us about what your life was like before you got Lyme disease.
It was like anybody else's, busy. I worked a lot, and it was, you never really thought about your health. You took it for granted, and you just do what you do, and you think you have tomorrow, and you don't worry about what you think, you feel invincible. You just don't think that something like this will happen, and there are other things that happen to other people, but that happens to other people and not to you. And so it definitely was a big change in how I looked at life and how I lived life. It starts out slowly, and then you start noticing things, and then from that point on, it's what is wrong with me and what is happening and how can I stop this?
So this happened in 2009?
Yeah, I was bit in 2009 at my kitchen table, actually, in Goleta. And I got bit, and I smacked it, and the tick was only on me for seconds. And there's a belief that it has to be embedded in you for a long time, and that's not true. It happens quickly. Some people will grab and some people put oil on a tick, and what that'll make a tick do is dump all of its guts into you, and that's all the infection comes in you instantly, so it doesn't have to be on you a long time. He wasn't on me for seconds, it seemed like. Maybe he was on for 10 seconds, I don't know. So I watched it, killed the tick, and the next day I had the bullseye. So I called my doctor, and I said, I got bit by a tick, and it's Lyme, he was infected, and I need to be treated. And his first response was, there's no Lyme in California. And that's the big lie that's out there. There's no Lyme in California. You can find it back into the 1990s. So I said, well, I'm going to be down in 20 minutes. And so I went down, he squeezed me in, and then he looked at my own and he goes, we better treat that. And so he gave me a course. He goes to the book, and the book for what they say if you get bit by an infected tick is 7 to 10 days of either doxycycline or amoxicillin or Ceftin. There's a couple drugs that you can take. Children take a different drug. So I didn't question him because he's a doctor, and they're really smart. They have white coats. They've got diplomas and stuff on the wall. And I'm not bagging on him. This community just doesn't have doctors. They don't know anything about Lyme in this community. So he treated me, and I was kind of nervous. And I had, from a surgery lying around, I had another like 7 days of whatever it was. I think it was the doxycycline is what he gave me. So I took another 7 days of doxycycline. So I think I did maybe 17 or 16 days. So that was 2009, and then I went on with life. And he's all, that's it, go ahead. That's it, all you have to do is kill it. Okay, done. So in 2012, I'd had a bad back, and I'd been fighting this back problem for years, and I decided I was going to have it fused. So I had my back fused, and they gave me the bone morphogenic protein, and they did this fusion. It wasn't 6 months later, in that 6 months, I started having weird stuff like vertigo in your head or dizzy things, and little weird things were coming along, but I felt great. My back felt great. I was thinking, oh, this is great. Well, then one day I had a rash pop up, and it looked like poison oak. And I get poison oak pretty easy. So the doctors go to their little book, and they go, oh, it looks like poison oak. Here's some prednisone. So they give you prednisone, and the rash goes away, not thinking twice about it. A couple weeks later, rash pops up again. So I get another shot of prednisone, plus to put me back on prednisone again. Well, that's what happens when you go into a doctor's office uninformed. And what happened with that one is I got this massive headache, and I called him and said, I've got this headache, it's unbelievable. So then he gave me some prescription for something to knock the headache down. I think it was alprazolam and some caffeine, something to dilate the blood vessels and relax you and put you to sleep or something. And wasn't very long after that I started having seizures at night. And so then the seizures were very painful, and it was horrible. And then I started having really bad arthritis in the joints. Then my heart started stopping and starting, and you could feel it. It would stop, and then you'd start to get dizzy, and then it would start. And so you get this whole host of crazy symptoms. So I go back to my doctor, and I said, could this be the Lyme? And he said, oh no, you'd have a bunch of other problems. And I'm not bagging on this doctor, because he's a good guy, and he just doesn't know. So he ran a barrage of tests. He tried really hard to figure out what was wrong with me. And Western medicine, he did, okay, let's run the brain scan. Okay, let's do a CAT scan. Let's do a MRI. Let's do it with contrast. Let's look at blood vessels. Let's look at this. And I kept saying, I can feel something in my brain right behind my eye. And I would tell him that, and he said, oh, well, we'll find it. And he just kept going. And finally, after test, and neurology, and we ended up, he just said, I'm stumped. He sat down, he said, I'm stumped. Well, in the meantime, I went to a separate doctor. I had some shoulder work done, and I wanted to see if there's anything wrong with my shoulders. I couldn't raise my arms up. I'd gone back to the back doctor and asked him some questions about the bone morphogenic protein. So then I started becoming a voracious reader online of bone morphogenic proteins, and I just started chasing things down. Still didn't have a diagnosis, but I was getting sicker and sicker. Then I would start to exercise, and I would get goofy in the head, which people who know me might say, you're always goofy in the head, but you would get, like, I almost want to say hyperglycemic or something. So you would get goofy in the head, and it would happen really quick, and what is going on with me? And there's a whole host of symptoms, and not everybody is the same. So I started, we started chasing it down. So my wife had a Dr. Schwartzbein, and she was emailing her. She had helped her in the endocrine world and said, is there any way you can see him to try to figure out what's wrong with him? And she said, send him to UCLA. They have some really good doctors down at UCLA. So down to UCLA I go. So I go down to UCLA and spent 3 months bouncing in and out of that place, going from one doctor to another, but mostly an endocrinologist down there. And she was very, very good. She said, we're gonna tell you what it's not. Might not be able to tell you what it is, but we're gonna tell you what it's not. Well, within a few weeks, the blood work was real crazy, cortisol was crazy, everything was all over the map. And she said, I know there's something wrong with you. I can't find it, but it looks like you have a hidden cancer. So then you're like, okay, I've got cancer. And then they found this little tiny cyst that I've had my entire life on one of my vertebrae, and they said, well, maybe it's picking up your adrenals, and it's mimicking, and it's causing all this. So we did some tests, and that wasn't it. So we're at 3 months and a pile of money into it. So it's like, what could this be? And I'm getting sicker the whole time. My heart's stopping and starting. I'm achy. You're hurting. Your neck is cracking. There's all kinds of things going on.
Time.
Yeah, and one of the UCLA doctors, he said, it was a neurologist, he said, well, maybe you have hiptic jerk. I studied it extensively, and so I have, my phone with me, and I'm hiptic jerk, and I look in and I go, I don't have any of this. I can see the hiptic jerk, I was kind of like, yeah, I don't think so. Right. So I left there, said, I'm done with UCLA. I got to find out. So one day we're back in Santa Barbara, and we're down at the Upham Hotel on Sola Street. And I think we're going to dinner, and we see that there's a doctor talking around the back. So we walk in around the back, and I start listening to him, and he said, he starts talking about things that attack the brain. And so I asked the receptionist, I said, can I see this doctor? And she said, yeah, we can take you Monday. And I'm like, great. So I go see him on Monday, and we walk to his office, and he sees a file of all the MRIs. He's got this pile of stuff, and he looks at me and he says, well, what do you want from me? And I said, I want to know what's wrong. He says, oh, you want a diagnosis? And he said, what are your symptoms? I spit them out real quick, and he said, I think you have a little bit of encephalitis, which is brought on it's swelling of the brain. He said, and what you're feeling is a reflective epilepsy seizures, a minor seizure brought on by the swelling. And I think, did you ever get bit by a tick? I was like, yeah, but I was treated. He's like, let's check this out. So he said there was a bunch of tests he could run. He could run metal toxicity, you could run all your amino acids, you could run all the health, you could see where your body was. And it was a test other than the Western blot test. And that's another whole discussion about the Western blot. That's the standard, the gold standard they use, which is about a 15% accurate test. Unless you do this, what they call, it's like a C6 something, it's in addition to, and then it gives them a better read. So we did the test, and sure, I came back positive for Lyme. And he asked my diet, and I didn't have any metal toxicity, and I didn't at that time have any mold toxicity, any of that baloney. And but what I did have was the Lyme. It showed positive for Lyme. And it also showed that I wasn't folating, meaning if you eat folic acid, it converts to methylfolate. And so you're now in the learning curve. You're like, what do you mean it doesn't convert? There's a whole amino chain. What? Huh? And so now you all of a sudden have to say, I have to fix me, or I have to try to fix me because I'm not getting anywhere. So he gave me the packet, all the stuff, and then he said, if you want to have a chance at life with this, leave this town. Nobody in this town is going to do anything for you. There's no Lyme specialists here, and a lot of people don't even believe in Lyme, latent Lyme, chronic Lyme, or Lyme in general. And that's kind of funny because that draws you down another rabbit hole. So what I ended up doing was you start searching and you find out that he actually said go to ILADS, which is the International Lyme Association of Doctors, and they're training doctors, and you can find out where a doctor is close to you. Well, the closest doctor at that time to me was qualified was down in Newport, Orange County, down that area. So the first doctor I went in to see, and he did some stuff, and it was really expensive, and it looked like a lot of a la carte charges to just pick your pocket, and I didn't think you were going to get better doing it. So then it was more research and find another doctor. And we remembered, we've always been into health, and Whitaker Wellness, which is closing down now, but Whitaker Wellness always had a lot of stuff we'd read about Lyme in the past. So we found this doctor that was there, and his name was Dr. Mark Philaday, and he was actually, I think, buying the clinic at the time, but that deal didn't go through. But he was, he said, have you been tested for co-infections? Well, co-infections, Lyme is Lyme. That's what you think, well, Lyme is Lyme. Oh, no. The co-infections are what do you in. And Lyme comes into your body, it shuts down your immune system, and then the co-infections tear you apart. So we did a test. We've done it 3 times now, but we've done tests for Lyme's with the Western blot. We've used this one called IGeneX, which is a pretty good test. A lot of the mainstream doctors won't use it because it's not in the little manual. And then there's DNA Connections that does your DNA, and they'll see, if you have Epstein-Barr and whatever you've had in the past. So that's another test. There's all kinds of testing out there. Vega test and this Lisa test. There's a lot of tests you can use, but some are more accurate than others. So sure enough, it not only did I have Lyme, but I had 2 strains of Lyme, and I had a Babesia and Bartonella. And Bartonella attacks the brain. And it turns out, as you learn, when you take any prednisone, it shuts down your immune system. And when you shut down your immune system, that's when the co-infections take over. And that's what Lyme does. It comes in, shuts down your B cells and your T cells, just like AIDS does. And then all these co-infections just ravish you. They go through your brain, they tear your brain up, they tear your joints up, they tear your heart up, they tear your kidneys, liver, bladder, everything gets destroyed by these co-infections. So the idea is, the doctor spits out some stats that are scary stats that you get. They say things like, okay, well, when you're loaded up like you are, and it's in every cell of your body, it's in your brain, it's everywhere. They give you numbers like, well, 50% of the people that are in this condition 50% can get it into some sort of remission, another 50%, that's sometimes the body just won't do it, depending on lifestyle, what you do, how you do it, and they end up sliding off and they don't make it. So I said, well, I'm going to be the 30% that doesn't, heck with that. So I never really looked at it with fear because this is a reality. And I just kept getting sicker while I was trying to find the answers. And then hyperglycemia came in and came and went, because one of the things you learn is diet, and you learn that sugar's bad. So I went off of all sugars, all fruits, all grains, breads, pastas. There's not a sugar, nothing's converting to sugars in my body. And that took about 2 weeks before I didn't feel crazy in the head and started clearing up the brain fog a little bit, but I was still hurting and every night having seizures. And once the seizures came on, they stayed all night until you went to sleep. So I was given drugs to knock me out so that I could wake up the next day and start anew. And so then you're just living your life looking for answers, and you're educating yourself. And the more you educate yourself, the more maddening it gets, because once you get a Lyme diagnosis, nothing's covered. You're not covered. Your insurance doesn't pay for it. And most people with Lyme get sicker and sicker, and they lose their jobs, and then they can't afford health insurance, which doesn't pay it anyway, so why keep the health insurance? And you can't get disability. It's very hard to get disability until the Lyme flips to one of the other greater diseases, which would be fibromyalgia, lupus, any of the autoimmune diseases, and that's where it takes you. So it's just a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. And so you have to try to stop it before it tears you up and gets you to that point. And so where I was I'm going to stop this. And that doctor the second doctor, Dr. Philaday, that I stayed with, he said, what do you want to do? And I looked him dead in the face and go, let's nuke it. And I went on a new protocol with a new drug. And it's kind of funny. My wife and I pay for health insurance. This is the crazy part. We pay over $3,000 a month for health insurance. And Lyme's not covered in there. Hyperbaric's not covered. There's a lot of things that are not covered. And hyperbaric is one of the treatments. And they're $200 a dive. And so it's not cheap. The first week I did 10 dives, and so it's $2,000 So it's really frustrating. And this new drug, this Alinea, which it's been around a while, but it hasn't been around as a biofilm buster. It's not, you can't buy it in the United States in the generic form. So when I went in to buy this drug, my copay was $2,874. Would have been my copay, but you can buy the generic brand from the plant if you get a prescription outside the USA and get it mailed in. So I was able to get the same 30 days worth of drugs, which would have cost me in my copay. Now think about it, you make your $3,000 health care payment and then a $2,700 or $807, whatever.
Right.
So you're almost at $6,000 before the month is over. This will break you pretty quick. But so I bought it outside the United States in the generic form from the factory that makes the generic form, and for a month it was $16. So you start looking for ways to, okay, now I've got this drug, and now so that's part of my protocol. And then there's lots of herbs that you take. And all along the way, you're joining Lyme communities, and you're learning about the drug, and you're learning about what took place, what this Western blot's about, this Lymex vaccine that doesn't work, that gave people Lyme, that they injected the first group of war vets to the Gulf War with to protect them, and they ended up all getting sick, and now they call it Gulf War syndrome. So the more you know, the more you get mad about it.
Lou, I have a question. What keeps you or others with Lyme disease from getting depressed and just cashing it in? I mean, just saying, I give up.
You know what? I'm in a lot of Lyme groups online, and I'm probably, I'm probably in 5 or 6. There's 10,000 in a bunch of them. There's healing stories of Lyme. There's all different. There's such and such protocol of Lyme. There's the local. There's a Santa Barbara group. And of course there's no Lyme in Santa Barbara, but there's a bunch of people in the group. And
how many?
I think in the Santa Barbara group, just in the one group, I'm just say about 50. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least 50. But I know at least 20 or 25 people who have, and 3 in the last month that have been tested positive in Santa Barbara County for the Lyme. They've been tested, they have Lyme. But you see on like Channel 3, this is the kind of a funny story. Channel 3 did a news story, and the reporter was out talking and saying, then there's no Lyme in California, there's no Lyme in Santa Barbara. And I said, really? So I called her up. First I called the news station, they gave me her email, so I emailed her. And she was just obstinate. I talked to professionals, and it's not here. And I'm, how can that be? I have it. I know other people who got it in Rattlesnake Canyon, and they got it at, Tucker's Grove, and got it, I know people who've been bit all over this town who are being treated, are sick as dogs. So one day I said, I'm going to call the county and find out why not. So it was a Friday, and it was about 4:45, and I called the county public health. And what stirred that was my wife actually went to her doctor, and he was incensed that he didn't hear about it. And when my wife told that doctor that her husband had, how come I don't know about it? And so he was incensed. So that made me make this call. So I made the call, and they were real nice. Picked up the phone at 4:45 on a Friday, which I didn't expect, and they said, oh no, we don't have any reported cases. I go, how can that be? I have it. I got it here. I know other people here. And she said, well, maybe infectious disease has it. Give them a call. So I said, all right, I'll call infectious disease. So they transferred me over, and I talked to her, and she said, well, it's reported by the doctors, and it's reported by the labs. And I said, it's reported by the labs? She said, oh, yes, law, they have to do it. Okay, so they have to report. So I'm still scratching my head. Why is this so quiet? Is this hush? What's going on? So I was talking to my doctor about it, and then I realized why it is and why it is. I thought, well, maybe because the IGeneX test is up in Palo Alto, maybe they do it up there. So I called up the Palo Alto and I asked, hey, do you send these results to, oh no, we send it back to the doctors. So the doctors are responsible for reporting this, or the lab is. So I'm like, well, this still doesn't make any sense. So one night I'm laying in bed and I start to thinking about it, and then I go, wait a minute. What's going on is, if they give you a diagnosis of Lyme, it's not covered by insurance. So they're not going to tell the county that you have Lyme. They're certainly not going to say that you have Lyme. So they're going to give you some other diagnosis. And generally it's going to be a fibromyalgia. It's going to be lupus. It's going to be some sort of thyroid, because they all come with Lyme.
So if I hear you correctly, then there are probably people in Santa Barbara County right now that have Lyme that don't know they haven't because they're not being diagnosed. And they're probably at home fearful, angry, and frustrated because they do not know what to do.
Absolutely. This one kid just recently, like 3 days ago, got diagnosed. And he's going to a doctor in Santa Ynez. And you got to give the doctor credit. She was going to do the Western blot test and said, I don't know anything about Lyme, but tell me what to do. So I was kind of helping him along and said, well, just go get a DNA connection. So sure enough, he got tested, and he had all the same symptoms I had.
Wow.
The skipping heart, he's just in agony, and he's 30-something years old, and he doesn't have insurance,
sad.
he doesn't have any money, and he's miserable. And they're here. And he now knows he has a Lyme diagnosis, and he cleaned his diet up, because I told him best thing you could do is clean your diet up. That was number one. And then you have to start trying to do for him, it'll be the inexpensive things. And there are a lot of inexpensive, and these Lyme communities, everybody's got there's a lot of people that have things that work. And what works for me might not work for the next guy. I mean, because it's the condition that your body's in. Sugar is really hard on your body. It's really hard. Your immune system comes from your gut, and if you're eating sugar, it's dealing with the sugar that your body thinks is a poison, and it's not dealing with the Lyme, so it's just making you worse and worse. So it just depends on the health of that person. But there are so many. That doctor up there said, I don't think this is Lyme, even though he had the paper that said this is Lyme.
Wow.
She said, this is MS. And that's what you get. You get a lot of MS diagnosed. You get a lot of fibromyalgia. If you get diagnosed with fibromyalgia,
It's covered.
they usually give you prednisone. If you have Lyme, the worst thing you could do is take prednisone or prednisone. And so it's trying to educate people. And this isn't look at me or it's none of that. This town is broken in the sense that the doctors are not being trained here. And you can't get any help. The closest person is down in Thousand Oaks, and he's Lyme trained. And then you're down Santa Monica, you know, and then there's some good ones up north. But in Santa Barbara County, if you tell the infectious disease guy that you have Lyme, he'll look at you and say, matter of fact, my wife argued with one at a tire shop. And she said, he had the DNA connections, as he has it. And he was like, oh. I mean, they just don't want to believe it. And, you know, so you start learning what works. And you better take control. So I went to a dietitian, find out what works, well, how can I strengthen my body to fight this thing? And I've been on 14 months of unbelievable amounts of drugs, ones that counteract and are toxic together, but they want that to break down the biofilms. And am I better? Yeah. I've stumbled backwards into a drug that stopped the night seizures. So since December, I've had very few night seizures, but I went 3 years every night with very painful seizures that went all night long. So, you know, there's a lot of herbal remedies. There's people that do bee sting therapy. I'm not a big proponent of that. I don't know what, you know, what works for me might not work for the next people. And I find that to be the case over and over and over, because some people's thyroid's already been taken offline.
Wow.
So
it sounds like it's just been amazing to have this information. Like, it's like you could be one of these Lyme specialists yourself enduring. So I wanted to ask one thing, go back to what Kurt had asked you. What keeps you going and keeps you from getting depressed?
well, I have a strong faith. So my faith is that I'm not fearful, because if you let fear drive you, then you're ruining today. Today is you know, for me, it's a gift. So I'm going to enjoy the day. I'm going to do what I have to do do what the Lyme needs, and then I'm going to go enjoy my day. Because if I don't enjoy my day and I just go, oh, poor me, then today is ruined, tomorrow is ruined, the next day is ruined. So I'm not worried. I know that this is either going to be a slow, miserable death quickly, or it's going to be slow over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever, you know, the best case scenario. So it's what I'm left with. And, you know, I have a wife and a child, so, you know, I'll just keep doing what I do. I'm fortunate. I can afford the treatments. Most people can't afford the treatments. Most people lose their jobs. Most people, I mean, it's not, you can't file for, this is not a disability. You know, hyperbaric chamber, you can't go in a hyperbaric chamber, one that's with the county.
You know, Lou, this has just been amazing. It's been informative to even Kurt and myself. So we want to thank you for being a game changer, because
You gotta have action. Get your faith on fire.